I have been in worse rooms. That was my first thought when the conclave's wardens sealed the hall of accounting behind us, and the great lock, a ceremonial thing, bronze and enormous, older than the Varethi's current calendar, clicked into place with the sound of a cathedral bell. High Prelate Sovan Thrall had called the session a sacred accounting. His chamberlain had read the charges in Old Varethi for 40 minutes while we stood on the receiving floor, which was cold stone, deliberately so. The chill was part of the procedure, documented in the conclave's own liturgical manual as a preparatory softening. I had stood through worse briefings. There were 6 of us. Ambassador Ines Varro at the front, hands clasped behind her back, expression neutral, watching the chamberlain the way you watch a subordinate complete a task you didn't assign. Beside her, Deputy Envoy Torren Salas, our legal specialist, who had pulled a small notebook from his coat pocket somewhere around the 20-minute mark and was writing in it with a short pencil. Behind them, myself and the 3 mission aides. The charges were elaborate. 18 counts of unauthorized presence in Varethi sovereign transit lanes, 12 counts of commercial registration under non-conclave frameworks. 1 count, the chamberlain's voice dropped for this one, reverent with outrage, of failing to submit mission credentials for doctrinal review within the prescribed 40-cycle window. The 40-cycle window had closed 11 years ago. I remembered the original memo. We had filed under the parallel framework because the conclave's own intake office had been sealed for renovation. No one had ever reopened it. The chamberlain finished. The lock sealed. The hall of accounting became ours, for however long the prelate required. Torren finished his note. The acoustics in here are quite good, he said. Not to anyone in particular. He wasn't wrong. The hall was a vaulted oval, dressed in the Varethi's ceremonial pale stone, a mineral unique to their home system, quarried and cut, in a tradition so old, the quarry records were considered sacred scripture. The vault caught sound and carried it evenly. When the lock had clicked, we had all felt it in our chests without hearing an echo. That was craftsmanship. I told him so. The floor, though, one of the aides said. Marin Solis, 2nd-year posting. Her first sacred accounting. The floor is aggressive. The floor was cold stone, as noted in the manual, designed to conduct the planet's baseline ambient temperature upward through the soles of the detained delegation's feet. Over a standard accounting period of 6 hours, the liturgical manual noted, the effect was significant. Varethi physiology is particularly sensitive to ground temperature. The conclave had presumably extended the practice to human delegations, under the assumption that bilateral biology was similar enough. Varro had already found the wall bench. She sat, crossed one leg over the other, and pulled a briefing folder from her satchel. The Varethi observer posted in the upper gallery, I had counted 2 of them, robed, still, watching through the decorative screen, had not moved. But I had been watching the screens, and I saw the one on the left shift slightly when the ambassador sat down. We had been here before. Not this hall, but this situation. The conclave had a history of calling sacred accountings for human missions. We had a history of clearing them. The first one, 11 years ago, had taken 3 weeks. The second had taken 9 days. This was the third, and the briefing Varro was reading was almost certainly the one our office had prepared 18 months ago, when the transit lane notices had started arriving, and it had become clear the accounting was coming. She had brought the briefing because she expected to have time to read it. The hours passed the way hours pass in sealed ceremonial rooms, slowly, and then less slowly once you stop tracking them. Torren slept for 2 hours in a way that would have embarrassed him if anyone had pointed it out, which none of us did. Marin Solis had brought, somewhat brilliantly, a small packet of dried fruit, which she distributed around the 2nd hour. I spent some time walking the perimeter of the hall, not out of anxiety, but because the proportions interested me. The Varethi built their sacred spaces to a mathematical ratio I had never found documented anywhere in the mission library, and I wanted to see if it was consistent with the ratios in the conclave's outer chambers. It was. I filed that away. The Varethi observers did not leave the gallery. I counted their position checks. Every 40 minutes, the left one leaned slightly forward to confirm we were still there, still present, still presumably softening. At the 6-hour mark, the lock opened. Not the great ceremonial lock, a secondary door, side panel, recessed. A conclave adjutant entered with a formal posture that indicated a scripted role, carrying a sealed document. He crossed the floor to Ambassador Varro and extended the document without speaking. She accepted it, broke the seal, and read. The prelate's terms were direct. A formal admission of the 18 transit counts. Withdrawal of all commercial registrations under non-conclave frameworks, and the credential submission, not the 11-year-old one, which the accounting itself had now entered into permanent record as a matter of dispute, but a new one, resubmitted fresh, under doctrinal review, which would take its own procedural time. Varro read it once. She set it down on the bench beside her. She said, "Tell the prelate we'll be in touch." The adjutant's stillness changed quality. He had been prepared for several responses: an argument, an objection, a counter-proposal, a formal refusal with attached documentation. The Varethi Doctrinal Conclave's sacred procedure for a sacred accounting included 7 branching response protocols, and the adjutant had been briefed on all 7. "We'll be in touch" was not among them. He left. The secondary door sealed. 12 minutes later, the ceremonial lock opened. Varro collected her satchel and her briefing folder, which she had finished somewhere in the 4th hour. She stood. We stood with her. The conclave's wardens were on the other side of the door, 6 of them, robed, and behind them, partially visible, the prelate's senior chamberlain, who had not been there when we arrived. Varro walked through. The chamberlain fell into step beside her and said something in formal Varethi about the prelate's desire to continue the accounting in a more productive posture. Varro kept walking. "We'll be in touch," she said again. I was the last one through. I glanced back at the Hall of Accounting as the wardens sealed it behind us. The vaulted pale stone, the carved mineral of the ceiling, cut to that consistent ratio, cold floor. The chamberlain fell back. We walked the conclave's corridor in a silence that felt different from the silence inside, heavier, on their end, and lighter on ours. Outside, the Varethi sky was the color it gets in the mid-cycle, a pale amber with the system's secondary sun not quite risen, throwing long flat light across the plaza. Marin Solis fell into step beside me as we cleared the conclave's entrance arch. "That was 6 hours," she said. 6 and change. What do you think happens now?" I thought about the adjutant's stillness, about the observer in the gallery who had stopped making position checks around hour 4 when the pattern was clear, about the chamberlain's voice dropping to reverence on that final charge, the 40-cycle credential window, while Torin was quietly writing something that had nothing to do with it. "They'll request a meeting," I said, "outside the conclave's primary administrative zone. They'll want to talk about the transit registrations without the accounting framework attached." "How long?" I considered. The second accounting had resolved in 9 days. But the second accounting had ended with a document. This one had ended with 5 words and a walk. 30 days, I said, give or take. She nodded. Practical. First-year posting, and already she understood that 30 days in this work is not a wait. It is a measurement. The distance between what they expected to happen and what did. The secondary sun cleared the horizon. The plaza went gold. Ambassador Varro was already at the transport, briefing folder tucked under one arm, speaking quietly to Torin about the afternoon's cable traffic. She had not looked back at the conclave's arch. She would not. There was nothing to look back at. The accounting had been recorded. The terms had been declined. The lock had been opened from their side. They had built the hall to produce an outcome. They had produced a different one.